Hello world, welcome to the 174th Climate Change Emergency Protest here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It is April 8th, 2022, and next week will be number 175 Climate Change Emergency Protest. Now it'll be on April 15th, 2022. I'm out here at the height of the Civil War, the high water mark for the South, and the beginning of the Union to take charge as to who's going to be the eventual winner, supposed winner, if there are any in war. It's called Pickett's Charge, and it happened in 1863. This is on the Gettysburg National Battlefield where I live, in the vicinity. I'm up over the ridge with Tanya. So, this was an example of corporate greed. Everyone thinks, oh, it was about slavery, and which it was, and, and states' rights, which it was, versus federal rights, which it was. But what it comes down is corporate greed. The corporations of slavery and the cotton manufacturing industry and the North came to odds with each other. And I say the corporation of slavery because they treated the black people of the country terribly. I mean, they were slaves, and they used them as a commodity, as a battery, essentially to run the machine. So it came down to this, that, whether they wanted to keep that as their thing or to have, human rights involved here, and to and the corporation of slavery. And eventually, thank God, the North won with that. And I'm sorry about you Southerners if you think otherwise. That's kind of bizarre thought process. It's not about history or heroism or anything like that. It's about ordinary people being convinced by corporations that they should fight for them, and convince them that there's a different cause involved than what is actually happening in front of them. So do you get a theme here as to what's happening now? I won't comment anymore because then I'll get blocked even more by FB and ratcheted down my talks even more than I am. So this is getting ridiculous, talking about climate change and how it is linked with everything. So right now, according to Antonio Guterres and the United Nations IPCC, they're giving their final warning, and we're past the time now, but this is his words. He's the Secretary General of the United Nations. The world is going to suffer an irreversible catastrophe if they don't get control of the climate change issue and if they don't hit peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2025, within the next 3 years, under 3 years. They have to reduce the carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. 45% by 2030, and reduce them altogether, had net zero by 2050. In reality, what has happened is that the 2015 Paris Agreement, which everyone thinks, oh, that's it, we won, climate change is well in hand. The 2015 Paris Agreement, newsflash, was 7 years ago. We're so far past that. In reality, the Paris Agreement stated essentially that by 2020, 2 years ago, we needed to start getting control of this climate change issue, reducing our CO2 immediately by a certain percentage per year. I think it was like 7% or something like that. And so it's not happening. In fact, with this Ukrainian war, for those looking at a time capsule a couple years from now and we're no longer around, there was a war between Ukraine, which was a country, and Russia, which was a country, but it was egged on by many reasons. I mean, this is just not purely about Russia invading. This goes back before that. There's deep-seated mental issues with Russia, Ukraine, NATO, which is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is a military organization, and the European Union, and the West in general, and their thought process. Just like the Civil War, they're not seeing the obvious thing in front of them. So everyone's all up in arms about that, and rightly so, because now atrocities are being committed in the country of Ukraine. But, this goes well beyond. Again, this is a corporate issue, and you look as to who's making out in this time, and, who's going to make a profit out of this. It'll be the war machine, the manufacturers of war machines. Exxon, for example, has made Exxon Oil. Okay, for those in the future here or listening to this, Exxon Oil is a corporation that produces oil out of the ground, and which is many of these battles are all about, all these wars and everything, that or water. So Exxon has made a record profit in the first quarter of 2022, in spite of all this supposed, oh, we're taking it on the chin for you, we're going to help you out. No, they're not. They're making record profits. So, you got to look at who's benefiting when these type of wars break out, and who makes out and who doesn't. Who doesn't is the ordinary person who's been co-opted into believing that they're fighting for whatever cause they're fighting for at the very moment, which they are. But it goes well beyond that. There's a deeper history. So right now we have a president called Biden. He's in charge. This is the future people I'm talking to because no one's going to be around in 10 years the way we're going. So, this President Biden here is decided due to this war and gasoline prices, which gets put in our cars, that we need to the lease land for gas and oil that he leases off through the federal government for them to drill. If they're not using the land, they need to use it or lose it. That's an insane policy. What's happening is that he's saying essentially you must drill, baby, drill all we can in land that's not being used for oil. So this is not a president that's engaged in climate change. In addition to that, we're releasing, the United States is 1 million barrels a day, 1 million barrels of oil per day for 6 months. That's 180 million barrels per day being released to reduce the gasoline prices. Rather than using this as an opportunity to switch off to renewables and develop technology for transportation, things like that, we're going to do this instead and also keep subsidizing the oil companies. So in addition to that, 31 countries around the world have agreed to release another 120 million barrels of oil also to take the pressure off everyone, and having to pay higher prices. Well, people aren't seeing it. Yeah, you're seeing the immediate issue, which is I got to survive right now. But what's going to happen is that we're 2 years past the Paris Agreement designated date to start reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we have no intention of doing that. Or, people might have intention of doing that, but the governments don't. And this is murder by the governments. And this is what Antonio Guterres has said. They're setting the world on fire, literally, at this point. So they're not serious about climate change. None of the governments are. So we're on the path to extinction. We keep this path going the way it is. And this is why we are on this path to extinction, because corporations have ruled the day, and they've convinced the governments, and because the governments are corrupted by the money that's involved with that. So instead of a 45% reduction by 2050 in carbon dioxide, the United Nations has said that we're actually going to increase carbon dioxide by 14%. So these are many chances that are lost, and people don't even know there's an issue concerning climate change because the media, the people that are shutting everyone down now who have a differing opinion, and also the mainstream media, are not reporting about climate change. Understand this. We have less than 3 years to act on this, supposedly, according to Guterres. I think we're 2 years past the point of acting on it, but that's just my opinion on that. And usually what happens with the United Nations, when these reports come out, they're watered down, lowest common denominator as to what they agreed to. So if they're saying we have only less than 3 years to act on climate change and reducing carbon dioxide, this is total panic on their part. They've gone from the year 2100, now they're down to the year 2025, which is less than 3 years from now, and saying we have to get things under control. So they've lost 75 years off their original predictions back in 2015. So it's a horribly catastrophic situation, and I quote again, I'm going to say this through this whole talk, we have less than 3 years to act on climate change and reduce carbon dioxide. Otherwise, we have an irreversible catastrophe. Do you get that? An irreversible catastrophe. There's no getting it back. This is once you're on the death nail and the death march, you ain't coming back. So this is it. This is the final bell, and people don't know what's happening. For example, CBS News the other day, which put me in a total funk for the last 2 days, talked for a whole 9 seconds about saying that, quoting Guterres, saying that we have less than 3 years to act. Otherwise, we have whatever it was, irreversible catastrophe. So CBS News covered it for 9 seconds on that. Meanwhile, and it was a 6th article that they covered. It was the end of the world prediction or call right there. And they covered it for 9 seconds. Meanwhile, that was the 6th article into their news broadcast, and they did it for 9 seconds. Right before that, they covered Tiger Woods, who's a golf player. They covered him for 2 minutes and 10 seconds. So the end of the world got 9 seconds. A golf player on a news network, a world news network, got 2 minutes and 10 seconds. So this is how messed up in the head everyone is. And they think it's okay. And people know what Tiger Woods is doing. People know about coronavirus. People know about Ukraine. But they don't know anything about our extinction that's coming up. So, and I don't know if people even care. They don't want to deal with it. It's childish behavior as to what's going on. But speaking of childish, you need to look at your children and all the children around and go, you know what? They're going to suffer a whole hellscape coming up. So this is the deepest nadir, this is the lowest point of our, climate change movement right now. This is our Pickett's charge. This is the defining moment, whether we want to actually do something or not. whether people want to get engaged or not. There's Extinction Rebellion in Washington, D.C. who's doing some things finally, and they're really doing a great job. You have London and things like that, but it needs to be a worldwide event as to what's happening and a worldwide cause. Uh, it's personally, you suffer great calamitous effects of this climate change, these type of broadcasts and things like that, and also friendships. People don't want to hear it as to what's going on with climate change. I've gone to numerous parties, numerous events, driven in cars with people, and no one ever asks. And they know that I know about climate change up and down, and so does my wife, Tanya. And yet they refuse to engage and ask any questions at all because it's too scary. I don't know what it is. Too scary. They don't care. They don't want to change their lifestyle. They think it's like preaching. But what's going to happen now, even according to the United Nations now, that we're going to see catastrophic effects, irreversible catastrophic effects. So, regardless of your personal affairs, whether your family likes you anymore or wants to talk to you about it or thinks you're hysterical, which I heard that many years ago back in 2015 from family members saying I was hysterical over this climate change issue. And I said, you need to be hysterical. And that was 7-8 years ago. So now here it is, the chickens have come home to roost and it's time to pay the piper. And here we are, and we're in deep trouble. And soon everyone will be hysterical. But people need to actually get into a total panic and then have directed action as to what to do concerning climate change. And number one is protest. Number two is vote for only politicians that are actually going to do something about climate change. Not these talkers that think, will say, I'm going to fight for you. It's an existential threat. And yet now he's doing nothing but pumping out more and more oil and authorizing more and more drilling. For example, 8 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for drilling leases. So this is where we are. People are dumb as far as voting issues, and they need to wake up immediately, not tomorrow, not the next day, and they need to get out and protest, not tomorrow, not the next day, and it needs to be constant protest, not tomorrow, not a week from now, not once a year. Don't sleep in bed, don't do whatever. Just get your butt out of bed and start doing something. If you have children, if you once were a child, if you care about children, if you care about anyone in your family or anyone that you see on the street, or care about yourself, we actually need to do something. So I'll catch you next week. That'll be April 15th. Hang in there, do something, please. But that's your choice. You're killing me as well by not doing anything, and that's fine, whatever. But I hope you get to it and do the right thing. See you later.